right is something that just fills me, um, frankly, with gratitude, but it also is humbling and it inspires all of us at the Food Depository. So thank you. Some of you I know have been in this mission and in this work for a long time. And whether you have been in the mission for a long time or you are just new learning about the Food Depository and the food issue, I just want to say our mission at the Greater Chicago Food Depository is a mission that requires us both to respond every day to the emergency needs of our neighbors, even on days when it is cold and trucks do not like to start and get to partners to deliver food. But our work is also to address the underlying circumstances of why people find themselves in a place where they need to turn to a food pantry in the first place. We do that through our policy work, through our systems change work. We do that by lifting our voice, by bearing testimony to what we see, and for committing to advancing change, which makes me all the more grateful that you are on the entire journey with all of us at the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Today, you're going to hear more about the specific changes and, frankly, more directly, the cuts that are coming forward in the SNAP program. You're going to hear about the Food Depository's 2026 policy priorities and our policy agenda. But just as importantly, you're going to hear about the opportunity to engage, to be a part of this work, to lift your voice, and to work with us to ensure that we can, in fact, we will, in fact, achieve the mission of ending hunger. With that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Molly, to get us started.
Thank you so much, Kate. And again, thank you all for the great show of force that we're already seeing on this webinar. Really excited to go through this with you all and to engage throughout the year with you all. So a quick overview of our agenda. We will be discussing the state of hunger, the SNAP cuts, and then also what comes next in terms of our advocacy. Some quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive the recording of the webinar as well as a download of these slides after the webinar is over. The Q&A and chat is open. Feel free to, as questions come up throughout the presentation, to submit those as they come. We will get to them as we are able to. And then friendly reminder that we do not allow AI note takers, just, Food Depository policy in our webinars and meetings. So we are going to go ahead and remove those. But if you have any follow-up questions or, need additional notes after the end of the webinar, please feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to assist you. So with that, I'm going to hand it to my colleague Nolan Downey to go over the state of hunger and an overview of the SNAP cuts and kind of where we're starting 2026 at.
Thanks, Molly. Hi, everyone. Nolan Downey. I'm the Senior Director of Policy at the Food Depository, and I'm so delighted and proud to partner with all of you to realize a policy agenda that is bold, that's powerful, and that is necessary to confront the gravity of the crisis that we face. Before my colleagues talk a little bit about what we can do together to fight back, I have the unenviable task of grounding us in the problem. And I want to be honest with you all that it is not pretty. If we go to the next slide, you all know by now that the federal government has made brutal and truly unprecedented cuts to the social safety net. We're going to remind everybody about what those were. But before we get there, and truly, before anybody even feels the impacts of those federal cuts, we have to recognize that the baseline of hunger in Illinois is already unacceptable. Before those cuts, 1 in 5 in our people of Chicago face hunger, 1 in 4 children. Across the state, as many as 25% of households don't have enough food to eat or are unsure if they'll have enough food in the future. If we go to the next slide, because of that need, and again, before a single person loses SNAP due to these federal changes, the emergency food system is already seeing historic demand. Last year, we served almost 200,000 households a month. and delivered 115 million pounds of food. Both of those figures are up 60% since 2019. We saw needs skyrocket during the pandemic, and it's never really come down. This already disturbing baseline, now coupled with the federal cuts to the social safety net, together threaten the largest crisis in hunger that the state has ever confronted. And now we're going to get to the reason why. And of course, that's these federal cuts. We'll skip ahead 2 slides here because we have to get to this point on the front end. To confront this crisis, if we're going to stand any chance, we need advocacy, we need partnership, we need collective action and solidarity, because the emergency food system can't meet this need. Food banks and pantries are not the answer here. And let me be clear, we're going to do everything that we can, as we always have, to serve people who are coming to us for food. That's not going to stop. But the Food Depository and our sister food banks cannot replace SNAP. For every meal that we provide, SNAP provides 9. It gives essential food assistance to households who need that additional support, but it's also an economic driver. It supports workers, retailers, farmers, billions of dollars into our state economy that we cannot replace. Now, SNAP isn't perfect. Last year, that was a central premise of our agenda, to boost the program because it wasn't enough. We need a strong social safety net for all people, but this Congress and this president are taking us full steam in the opposite direction. So if we go to the next slide, we see what happened. And that's HR 1, referred to as the one big, beautiful bill. But again, we've got to be clear, this bill is grotesque. It is repulsive. It is an abomination. It takes an already meager, disinvested in social safety net, and it slashes it. The largest cuts we've ever seen to SNAP and Medicaid, $200 billion from SNAP, another $1 trillion from healthcare programs. We should never lose sight of the fact that these cuts to critical programs, taking away food, taking away healthcare, increasing deprivation, sickness, and death in our communities, was done to supercharge cruel immigration enforcement and to make the wealthiest individuals in our country a little bit richer. This is a reflection of truly unbridled greed and brutality. I don't have the words to condemn it harshly enough. Certainly not words that I can say while being recorded. But now I need to relay some of the specifics. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to focus on the 3 major changes to SNAP. What this bill does is shift significant costs to the state, including, for the first time in the 60-year history of the program, making the state pay for a portion of benefits. It removes SNAP eligibility for most lawfully present humanitarian immigrants, breaking a promise that this country has kept for decades. And it expands cruel and ineffective work requirements. Together, these cuts are going to impact all 2 million SNAP recipients, 650,000 children. But if we don't act at the state level, we are all going to feel this. So if we go to the next slide, let's talk about the first change. As I mentioned, the state is going to have to pay in the future more than it's ever had to continue operating SNAP. And in SNAP, there are 2 buckets of costs. There's the cost of benefits, which again have always been 100% federally funded. And then there's the cost of administering the program, which the state and federal government have historically split 50-50. What HR 1 did is change both of those arrangements. So starting this October, the state has to pay a higher percentage, 75%, of the administrative cost for the program. That's going to cost the state an additional $80 million a year. Then, starting next October, the state will be responsible for a portion of the cost of benefits for the first time ever. Now, these massive new costs together could be as much as $800 million per year that the state would have to pay. And if it does not pay, we lose the SNAP program for everyone. This is an all or nothing proposition. So we need to be very focused on what we're going to do to make sure that the state can absorb these massive financial shocks. If we go to the next slide, HR 1 also expands the SNAP work requirement. Under the work requirement, some SNAP recipients must work, volunteer, or participate in an employment or training program for 80 hours a month. Recipients who do not meet the work requirement or qualify for an exemption only get 3 months of SNAP in a fixed 3-year period. So this is a very harsh federal policy. It's like baseball, 3 strikes and you're out. The big change is who has to meet the SNAP work requirement. So now it's people between ages 18 and 64 who are not disabled, don't have any type of physical or mental limitation that impacts their ability to work, and who also do not have children under age 14. These requirements begin February 1st, which I believe is on Sunday. So they are quickly upon us. So if people are not exempt and they don't work or volunteer those 80 hours, February is going to be the first strike for people. Now, one thing to be aware of is that there are many reasons that a person could be exempt. So we'll talk more later about how people can spread the word in their community about these changes. It's very important for people to recognize the steps that they could take to be exempt depending on their circumstances. We also have to highlight that we reject work requirements conceptually. And we have to have moral clarity here. Food, as Kate mentioned, is a basic human right. I don't care what a person's circumstances are, they deserve to eat. The end. We want people to have good jobs. We want those jobs to pay them fairly and to treat them well. But work requirements are not effective, and the research has demonstrated this time and time again. If we go to the next slide, I'll talk about this last major change, which is the change to immigrant eligibility. After HR 1, only U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, those are your green card holders, Cuban, Haitian entrants, and COFA migrants will be eligible for SNAP moving forward. That is it. So just to be clear about some of the statuses that are getting left behind, that's many humanitarian status, 16,000 people in Illinois, refugees, asylees, T visa holders, victims of domestic violence will start to lose eligibility for SNAP on April 1st. In SNAP, the state has to redetermine people's eligibility every 6 months. So people are going to start to lose eligibility at their next redetermination. So it's not going to happen all at April 1st, but that is when people are going to start to roll off of the program. And then if we go to the next slide, I'll close with this, which is just highlighting again some of the major talking points that we've been using when we talk about just at a high level some of the changes here. First, again, HR 1 was the largest cut to SNAP in history, $200 billion, truly massive. The next is that changes to work requirements and immigrant eligibility population eligibility, those are happening now. So February 1st is when work requirements start, April 1 for immigrant eligibility. But again, critical to recognize that particularly with work requirements, people who may be exempt need to get those exemptions in now. Illinois has to be prepared to pay this new benefits cost share, which again, together with the administrative cost share, could be as much as $800 million per year. And if it does not, we will lose SNAP entirely. That is a huge point to make sure that everyone understands. The very future of the SNAP program is at risk. And before I pass to my colleagues, I will leave you with this. And Kate mentioned it a little as well. It's bad right now. We are on the ropes. There's no way around it. And we should recognize that they will keep going. So we have been cut deep, but they will keep cutting if we don't stop them. And I know this team, and I know many of you, we're not going to lay down. So we are going to fight like hell, but we have to do it together. And so now I will pass to my colleague Skylar to talk a little bit about what we can do together.
Thank you so much, Nolan. And I do see some questions starting to come in the chat function. Just know you can also put questions in the Q&A. If you have questions related to these monumental changes that are coming down from SNAP, start to populate that so we can get you your answers by the end of our time. And someone also asked again, will the recording and slides be available later on? They will be. We will send them out after this meeting. So what can we do? You heard all of the gravity, the scale of problem that we are going to be solving collectively, the enormity of local levels of hunger that will skyrocket because of these federal policy decisions. What can we do about it? The next slide shows that there are opportunities for all of us collectively to engage in advocacy, and we have to do it at all levels, federal, state, and in our local communities. So what does it look like at the federal level? We will continue to do everything in our power to ensure that members of our congressional delegation and side by side with advocates from all around the country, we are pushing Congress to delay as long as possible this SNAP cost shift to states that Nolan just noted. Because we have a real possibility that SNAP might no longer exist in Illinois if we can't foot that whole entire bill. That's the same proposition in every single state in this country. Doesn't matter if it's red, purple, or blue. This is particularly political, unpopular. Governors around the country are raising their hands saying this will be the end of our safety net in our state. And there's a lot of concern. So we will continue to push back on trying to get a delay to that timeline, all while the end goal at the federal level is to reverse the cuts that have happened, and not just to SNAP, but also to Medicaid and to a wide array of other safety nets that people who are on SNAP also rely on, thinking about supportive housing, thinking about services for survivors of domestic violence. All of these causes are intersectional and advance our mission of ending hunger. And so we need to make sure that we are restoring the safety net to what it was, and in the future, bolster the safety net so that it is stronger and better serving the families that we are in community with. On the state level, on the last slide, I'll note the opportunity for advocacy that we'll get into the weeds on in these next few slides here are twofold. One, we need to mitigate harm. There are a lot of people, as Nolan just noted, that are going to be losing access to their critical lifeline benefit of SNAP. We need to mitigate harm for those folks and connect them to some sources of emergency assistance, all while we are not taking our eye off the prize for what's coming down in 2027 relating to this huge price tag for the state of Illinois in order to keep SNAP intact. And lastly, at the local level, we need to mitigate harm by connecting as many people as possible to those exemptions from the work requirement that Nolan noted. And at the end of this meeting, our Take Action opportunity will be providing you with a toolkit where you can do just that. At the same time, we also need to be gathering stories and data about the impacts of HR 1. We need to make sure that we are elevating the real human harms that we are making necessary for families that are going to have to choose between food and medical costs and paying their rent and critical transportation and childcare. Families should not have to make these compromises, and these cuts to SNAP and Medicaid at the federal level are going to necessitate those tough choices. We need to uplift how challenging work requirements are for families to comply with, and the need to roll back these cuts entirely and restore SNAP and bolster the program moving forward. We also need to aggregate the data of how these federal cuts are impacting our local economies. As Nolan noted in one of his earlier slides, SNAP does create a significant source of local economic opportunity. For every $1 spent on SNAP, it creates $1.5 in economic value. And that economic value, that proposition, is going to be in shambles when these SNAP cuts happen. So we need to aggregate that this is hurting not just families, but our local retailers who may have to shut their doors because of these scales of SNAP cuts. And last but very not least, we need to make sure that those neighbors that are no longer going to be able to rely on SNAP because they are newly ineligible, they need to be connected to other sources of emergency food, such as our 850 different partners who are providing food every single day within our pantry network just within Cook County that exists throughout the state of Illinois within the Feeding Illinois network of food banks. And again, to Nolan's earlier point, while this connection to the emergency food system is necessary, our emergency food system cannot replace SNAP, and it is not prepared for the massive influx of need that we are about to see. But we still need to do everything in our power to try to serve those neighbors who will be in crisis. So that's a lot, but in the future slides, I'm actually going to dive deeper on state because that's where we see there's a real opportunity for our collective action, particularly in the next 6 months as we enter into the Illinois General Assembly session. So our first proposal here, Molly, if you can, thank you. Our first policy priority for 2026 at the state level is is providing emergency assistance for people who are losing SNAP. So Nolan had noted earlier, an estimated 211,000 Illinoisans are at risk of losing their SNAP benefits due to the changing work requirements. Now we are trying to drive down that number as much as possible by connecting qualifying Illinoisans to work requirements requirement exemptions, which we can talk about during our Q&A portion. But there's still a significant risk that we are about to see the largest dip in benefit loss that the program has ever experienced nationwide, but also in Illinois. So locally, rates of hunger will skyrocket. If the Food Depository serves just about 200,000 households every month, imagine if 100,000 of these Illinoisans reside within Cook County, the level of demand, the level of need we are about to see in our local communities as soon as this spring in May. And we think that the state can play a role here to provide an emergency assistance off-ramp for those neighbors who will be losing SNAP because they cannot comply with the changing work requirements. We have scoped the bill to have a title that is akin to the mission, which is families receiving emergency support for hunger or fresh benefits. The way we're scoping this program, it would provide a one-time payment covering 3 months of a household's lost or reduced SNAP benefits. Now, this would be a significant and critical investment on the part of the state of Illinois, but it would be Illinois standing up to say, we know that because of these federal law changes, folks will be in crisis. What can we do as a state to show up for people in their moment, in their time of need? If we aggregate that 211,000, which is the current number that we're at in terms of Illinoisans at risk, and we multiply that by the average SNAP benefit amount, this could be an investment at the scale of up to $125 million a year for the state. But I'll also note that SNAP, again, is an economic multiplier. So for every $1 that's spent on benefits like SNAP, it does create economic impact within local communities. We've already heard from local grocers that have warned that with this dip in SNAP benefits, they might have to close their doors because of the number of people that rely on SNAP within their communities. And so as we're thinking about that assistance, it's twofold. It's for the families, for the households who will get kicked off, and also for our local communities that benefit from SNAP. The second bill is also in the same bucket of food assistance for lawfully present immigrants. So as we think about the bucket around mitigating harm, what can we do for the neighbors that are at risk of losing their benefits this spring? Nolan had noted that 16,000 lawfully present immigrant neighbors, including asylees, refugees, and others, will soon lose access to SNAP due to those new federal eligibility restrictions. There's a real opportunity here in the state of Illinois to stand up and say, not in Illinois, we can support these folks, many of which are fleeing persecution from their home countries, many of which are caught up in long extended processes to get their U visa, their T visa, their asylee status confirmed. How can we connect these folks to critical assistance in Illinois as they are making their home here, and many have lived here for years? So again, Illinois has an existing program that you see on the screen here called VTTC Food. And that stands for Victims of Trafficking and Torture and Other Serious Crimes, which connects people who have applied for their TU visa or asylum status with critical food assistance until their applications are approved. And previously, this was really considered a bridge benefit until those households were then eligible for federal SNAP. But now with the HR1 changes, it will effectively be a bridge to nowhere, because once folks attain that status, they will no longer be eligible for SNAP. So we think the state can really stand up in this moment for those lawfully present immigrants and expand the existing VTTC program to cover not just those who have applied for these statuses and who are awaiting their final status determination, but for people who have these statuses, who are TU visa holders, asylees, refugees, etc. We think that this price tag for the state, assuming 100% uptake, which we know will not be the case with an opt-in program that folks need to apply for, this would be about $35 million for the state of Illinois. And again, because it's structured so similarly to SNAP, folks, the benefits are calculated the same way, the same average amounts, the same deposit onto an EBT card. It has a very similar economic multiplier impact for our local communities in terms of the value that this can create, not just for the households that will receive this ongoing support, but for the local businesses for which people will be spending their dollar to purchase food for themselves and their families. And last but not least, on our Springfield agenda, I want to elevate our third idea here, which is a SNAP response working group. So you heard me elevate those two areas of harm reduction for folks that are going to get kicked off of SNAP in 2026. But we also need to have, again, our eye on the prize for what's coming down in 2027 to ensure that the General Assembly is aware of the stakes. If we don't foot the full bill of $800 million to keep SNAP intact in the state, that SNAP might no longer exist. And there's a lot of changes that the IDHS, the Illinois Department of Human Services, is navigating every single day in order to comply with some of the federal law changes. There's a real opportunity to keep the General Assembly on that journey, to understand what are the real impacts of HR 1 in every single district across the state. And as we look ahead to 2027, how are we trending in terms of the state's payment error rate reduction, which is going to be the basis by which it is calculated how much the state has to pay for the benefit costs in October of 2027? How are we trending in real time so that we as a collective community, both Illinois General Assembly members, the administrative contacts, but then also, nonprofits, advocates, people like you on this call, we all need to be aware of what is that price tag that we're going to need to fight for in order to keep SNAP intact. And we think this SNAP response working group can shine the right light with information that would be distributed through public reports to be able to keep us all informed and build a base of more anti-hunger champions within the Illinois General Assembly that we know exist, but we need to keep them on the journey about the gravity of the cuts that we're talking about today. And last but very not least, on the next slide, I do want to elevate that all of the work we do it in partnership. We have to do it in coalition. While we're talking today about the affronts to SNAP in particular, there's a wide array of affronts to our broader safety net, to the rights and dignity of humans within our communities that we need to be resisting. And so as we do this work, we need to do it side by side with many other advocates and coalitions advancing the rights of people that we love in Chicagoland. And what does that look like? It means we need to be fighting against any future changes to the Medicaid program. As we are doing harm reduction on the SNAP side, think about harm reduction on the Medicaid side, because so many of our neighbors that rely on SNAP also rely on Medicaid. We also need to be defending against further cuts to our safety net, both at the federal level, but also at the state level, given challenging budgets that may come upon the state in the years ahead. The third, we need to monitor changes to public charge that might impact the access of our immigrant neighbors to safety net benefits that they need, that they deserve, but for which we do not want their access of vital nutrition safety net benefits to negatively impact their immigration status. And we're actively monitoring some proposed changes that the federal government might make in that regard so that we can inform our neighbors accordingly on their rights for benefit access. And the next, to acknowledge that there's a number of coalitions we're part of that are advancing policies that will address the root causes of hunger. So thinking about how do we build economic thriving, economic prosperity for families that have been left out for too long. And there's so many different groups that are doing just that. One example is improvements that are needed to the child tax credit that we all fought for in the state of Illinois a couple of years ago, some tangible opportunities we can improve upon that. And then side by side with many other coalition partners advancing causes that will impact the root causes of hunger, from healthcare access to housing instability, access to domestic violence services and support. We need to be arm in arm in this moment, all while we are uplifting the cause to protect and save SNAP, so that ultimately we are driving towards our overall mission of ending hunger that I know you all share a concern and care for. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Molly to talk about taking action and what you can do to get involved in some of these opportunities for advocacy in the future.
Thank you much. Thank you so much to both Skylar and Nolan. I know that was a lot. I can see of the Q&A and the chat, popping off. So I'm glad to see that folks are asking great questions. I just want to take a moment. This was a lot. I hope you're feeling energized. I also recognize if you are feeling overwhelmed. It is a common feeling among ourselves as well, of feeling both, fired up and ready to go, and feeling kind of the weight of everything that we just talked about on us. Protecting SNAP is one of the most important fights of our time, and it's truly only by being shoulder to shoulder and taking action together that we'll be able to really make a change here and be able to protect and save the program. The road ahead is steep, right? We just, as Nolan mentioned, not only did the cuts that happened, are they going to have very disastrous consequences for everybody using the program and beyond, but the threats continue. We see the ways in which all struggles during, for equity and food justice are connected to each other. And it's true that the road ahead feels very tough, right? But I also know that as things get very tough for us, that this community is known to show up and to take action and to rise to that challenge. So I know also that together we can spread the word about these changes happening. We can push our elected officials to energize or to prioritize ending hunger, and we could share stories about the stakes of what has happened here in order to make the consequences impossible to ignore, right? So you have taken a very important first step in joining us today and being a part of this movement. And I'm going to go through some immediate tangible action steps that you can take as part two. I implore you to take action today, whether it's one of the actions I'm sharing right now, whether it's an action alert that is related to SNAP that you're seeing yourself. Take action in whatever feels right for you, but take that extra step today. Really, together, we can protect SNAP. We can fight for a future that is truly equitable, just, and rooted in dignity for all of us. So with that, I want to share some ways that you can get involved in the Food Depository's advocacy. If you are on this call right now, you are likely already involved in one of these ways, but I just want to highlight the different kind of advocacy pathways that you can take within our own ecosystem here. The lowest lift, the easiest way, is to advocate on your own. You can join our Advocacy Action Center, which most of you are likely already in. If you get our action alerts, our monthly legislative update newsletters, invitations to webinars such as this one, you are already in the Action Center and you're doing that great first step. If you are seeking skills and additional deeper trainings, you can join a newly launched program called Champion Advocates, which is meant for skill building on advocacy, outreach, storytelling, and elected official engagement. And I will share a couple of great ways that you can sign up for those trainings on the next slide. And then lastly, Skylar will share a bit more about our new Save Our SNAP coalition that we are launching statewide in order to rally the troops across the state, because again, as hopefully we've laid out for you well, it's really all or nothing with this program, right? So we got to make sure that it's not just us fantastic advocates on this call right now, but it's everybody statewide. So if you are interested in becoming a champion advocate, if you have listened to our spiel today and said, my God, that is, horrifying. I want to get involved and to help fight to protect SNAP in Illinois, to do what I can to spread the word to my neighbors, we have some great options for you. The first is on Monday, February 23rd. We have an elected official engagement training, which you can see the QR code for right here. I will mention that in the follow-up email, I will also send the direct links to these trainings that I'm mentioning today, just to make it a little bit easier. That is going to be virtual, and it will give you some tips and tricks on engaging elected officials on this topic. And then the other training option is our community outreach and engagement training, which will be happening here at the Food Depository on Wednesday, February 11th from 10 to 11:30. It will be co-led with our fantastic community engagement team, as well as our neighbor engagement team. And we will be talking about community outreach and education and engagement to be able to create action plans for how we can help get the word out about these changes and to protect people's benefits. You can sign up for both. They're not mutually exclusive. So the links, again, I will be sending out in a follow-up email, but you can find them here on this QR code. And then I'll pass to Skylar to talk for a second about the Save Our SNAP Coalition.
Yeah, thank you so much, Molly. What is the Save Our SNAP Coalition? So this is a coalition that we are forming in early 2026, side by side with partner advocates from all across the state. So we've been doing a lot of deep listening since July when HR 1 passed to say, what do we need in Illinois to galvanize all of us to be united in this fight that will, because these impacts are far reaching in every single district all across the state. We need advocates in every single district to be building relationships with their elected official, making sure that they know SNAP is a lifeline for us, for our families, for our neighbors, for our communities, and make it as politically unpopular as possible in order to cut SNAP in the future, either by not fully funding it in Illinois or, not reversing it at the federal level, which is our long-term goal, reversing the cuts to SNAP. So this coalition is intended for organizations that already engage in advocacy, that already may have a presence in Springfield. Maybe you've attended a number of annual lobby day events. You engage in advocacy every day within your local communities. The coalition is a great space for organizations of that type. If you're brand new to advocacy, recommend that you first start with the Champion Advocate training program that Molly will re-up some of the links for. That's a great opportunity for overall skill building. And then if the journey is right and you feel like you want to do more and engage in the statewide advocacy, come one, come all. We would love you to join the coalition. The coalition is not intended for individual advocates, but there's going to be so many opportunities for individuals to find a place in this work. So Molly had mentioned the Champion Advocate training program that will coalesce in opportunities for individuals to join us for in-district meetings with elected officials, for annual lobby days, for opportunities for you to spread the word about advocacy actions on social media. There's so many things that individual folks can do, but this specific coalition would be for organizational partners. I'm going to drop in the chat the coalition interest form so that you have it. We are actively scoping this coalition as we speak alongside many other partner organizations, very much modeled after our friends at Protect Our Care that are going to be mobilizing so closely around the Medicaid cuts to create an organized constituency on the SNAP side. And some possible areas for work of the coalition are legislative advocacy, so with our lawmakers, particularly at the state level, administrative advocacy, so thinking about our administrative advocacy with the Illinois Department of Human Services, with the USDA on their implementation of these changes. We're also interested if there's momentum and interest from participants in creating a caseworker community of practice. That would be an opportunity for folks who have more neighbor-facing roles that do benefits access work all the time, that are going to really be on the cutting edge of meeting with neighbors and explaining these changes and trying to get them connected to SNAP or trying to get them connected to work requirement exemptions. An opportunity for those caseworker type advocates to be in a community of practice with each other to elevate, I'm having this issue or I'm not clear on this one step within ABE, because we know how technical these changes will be that will impact folks' benefits. And last but not least, outreach and storytelling. As I noted before, we know that we have limits. We're the Cook County Area Food Bank. We need partners all across the state that are going to be sharing this information with their networks and also gathering stories about the real human harms from these cuts to SNAP and building the overall movement in order to reverse these cuts in the long haul and ensure that Illinois stands strong to support our neighbors on SNAP. So again, I did drop that coalition interest form in the chat. We will also send it in the follow-up email. And then today I had done an overview of the 3 different legislative priorities that the Food Depository will be advancing within our Springfield agenda. For these specific bills, I am going to drop some more detailed fact sheets for bill number 1 and bill number 2 within the chat here, if it'll let me. And I'm also going to drop our endorsement form. So if you're part of an organization and your organization regularly endorses pieces of legislation, and you want your organization to be listed on a future fact sheet for these bills, I have elevated that fact sheet that your organization will eventually be added onto within the chat here. And my links for my endorsement form, while Molly is doing a wrap up, I'm gonna drop them in the chat because we're having some technical difficulties, but I'm gonna get them ready for you all. The VTTC bill, so the Food Support for Lawfully Present Immigrants, that endorsement form and the fact sheet are pending because we are leading this bill side by side with our partners at the Latino Policy Forum and many other advocates that have fought for the VTTC program since its creation many years ago. And so stay tuned for that. Once it's available, we will send it out. We do not have bill numbers yet for these pieces of legislation as they have not been officially filed by our champions in the House and the Senate. But once they do, we will send those around to you all, this crew of incredible advocates on this call, so that you can read the text of the legislation if that's something you want to do in your personal time, your professional time. But again, those fact sheets that I dropped in the chat, that's a great level of detail for you to get a bit more grounding in the proposals we talked about today. And we really welcome your thoughts, your reactions. We want to hear, if you think these proposals will support folks within your community, if you're interested and energized to make these, law in the state of Illinois, we would love to have you in the work ahead. And on the VTTC bill, though we don't yet have the fact sheet and the endorsement form, I am dropping my email within the chat so that you can email me directly for more information. And with that, Molly, I'll kick it to you and I'll drop the endorsement forms in the chat.
Thank you, Skylar. Just a couple more slides before we officially open it up to Q&A. And just FYI to Skylar and Nolan, I'll put you on the spot to highlight some of the questions we've been getting, since I'm sharing my screen and can't see them, but I see a lot of people asking questions. So on top of the wonderful and hopefully very energizing and engaging advocacy work that we have going at the Greater Chicago Food Depository, we are building a community engagement and awareness building campaign that is meant to create community-centered responses and build awareness about the changes to SNAP, and to work very closely with partners, both food access partners and additional community-based organizations on the ground, to be able to get the word out, to hear feedback about what is going to be the most useful for people, to be able to get a sense of direction that we should be going in our policy and advocacy work. So we would love to collaborate with you, to hear your ideas. On the next slide that I shared, there is a link that will include, there is a toolkit that will include a link where you can request presentations from the community engagement team or from the advocacy team to bring this conversation directly to your organization, to your neighbors, and we can keep this work going. With that, the other immediate action that I am asking everybody to take part in right away is to help spread the word about SNAP changes. We have a really fantastic SNAP Rules Are Changing toolkit that you can see some screenshots of right here. And this toolkit includes graphics for social media, sample post language that you can use, blurbs for newsletters and emails, flyers that you can print out with a QR code that will link somebody to more information, and screeners. The more people that we can encourage to submit or to screen themselves for an exemption for the new work requirements, the fewer people will be stuck with the new work requirement rules when that time comes. So we've mentioned that time is starting on Sunday, February 1st. That doesn't mean that come Sunday, if somebody doesn't get it in, that it's useless and there's no point in submitting. Definitely not true. They have through the end of the month of February to be able to submit an exemption and still be able to save all of their benefits. And even if somebody finds out in March or April, they can still save some of their benefit, or they could still prevent further strikes against their record, I should say, should they, as long as somebody figures out that they need to be exempt from work requirements before May 1st. So happy to follow up with additional questions there, but this is really, we suggest post on Instagram, post on Facebook, print out the flyers, send an email, however you like to communicate information. This is so, so, so important that people know that this is happening and that what they need to do to protect their benefits. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for some questions and answers. I know that I could see a lot of chat and questions come in while we were presenting, so I'm going to put Skylar and Nolan on the spot a bit to highlight some, maybe there's been some either common question or something that you thought was a really good question that came in through the chat that everybody should hear.
I can kick things off because I got two that I want to uplift. There was one very good question about the mechanics of the work requirements and how they apply to students of higher education. It's a little bit complicated and there's a nuance there, so would really encourage folks, if they have more questions, to reach out. We've also done some webinars through the Illinois Commission to End Hunger that touch on all the changes in a lot more detail. But I will say that while students of higher education, if they're enrolled at least half time, are exempt from the work requirements, they still have to meet specific student eligibility rules. And one of the ways to meet those rules is by working. So it's a little bit of this weird cyclical thing, but they can also be exempt because of their pathway of study, or if they do federal work study, or if they're a caregiver. So I think for students of higher education, what's really operative is those student eligibility rules. And in most cases, as long as they continue to meet those rules, they should be eligible. The other question I wanted to uplift was a question about specific revenue solutions, or how the Food Depository is going to be talking about how the state should pay for these things. And I'll just say at a high level a couple things. We know that we're asking the state for a significant investment on all of this. This is, because of the moment, I think, more than we've ever had to demand at the state level, and it's going to be very difficult. I will say that we are in partnership with a lot of our organizations across the state that have been champions on revenue work. But at a high level, we cannot be agnostic about where the state gets the money. We know that connecting to specific revenue solutions is one way to win, but I think our values really are that we need revenue that's raised fairly, and we cannot sustain any more cuts. This problem is not a problem that the state can cut its way out of, and so I think we would resist any attempt to try, particularly if those cuts come from an already underfunded human services sector. So I think, we're still evaluating the strategy with respect to how we're going to talk about the connecting specific revenue to this spending ask, but we know that it's going to continue to come up, and we know that that significant investment is going to be critical to winning. Skylar, I don't know if there are any questions you wanted to uplift from the chat.
No, it looks like most folks got their question answered. We had some great questions out here. Many people are asking for the coalition link, so I'm just going to go ahead and drop it one more time in the chat so folks have it. And again, all this information is going to be sent out in the follow-up email after this presentation.
I'll text you. Okay.
There was a question.
Oh,
here.
there's a question here. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
No,
Maybe
go
we were
ahead.
thinking of the same one. So someone's asking how to prove that you volunteer in the hours. Maybe, Nolan, can you share a little bit about where the state is at around documentation, both for volunteering but also for working?
You read my mind. Yeah, so particularly with volunteering, if people are engaged in self-initiated community service, they can volunteer at their church, a pantry, another community-based organization without having to get pre-approval from the department. So they can do that on their own volition. What's important is making sure the department knows how many hours they're volunteering. And once they establish that they're meeting that 80-hour mark, the department is going to assume that that's the case unless they say otherwise. So the department has changed a little bit about people's reporting obligations. And I think what's important to understand is just make sure your information in the system is up to date with respect to your work hours and your volunteering hours. And if you're over 80, just make sure the department knows that and that you get that updated as soon as possible. But critical to know that they can do that self-initiated volunteering, but that the department in most cases isn't going to automatically know how many hours somebody is volunteering. So they've got to report that.
Similarly, Nolan, if you know the answer to this one, can a person volunteer by taking care of an elderly family member?
Yes. So that could be a separate exemption. And so I think this is an important distinction because we talk about complying and activities that people can do, but folks that have caretaking responsibilities, particularly for children who are under 6 or for older adults, particularly if those adults are disabled, that can be the basis for an exemption. So that's a really clear one on the forms, and maybe we can even circulate the exemption forms. But if somebody has caretaking responsibilities, they should be exempt and not having to worry about telling the department how many hours that they're doing that, or something like that. So hopefully that's an exemption situation.
And I will say, if we're not able to pull up the exemption form so quickly, we can include it in our follow-up email. Either link and or PDF, whatever's easier.
I will note one other question that I just thought it was helpful to point out, which is that we've been pleased that there's been a lot of coverage in the media about this issue, but we're also seeing more national coverage around some states' attempts to limit what types of foods can be purchased with SNAP. Illinois is not doing that. So I want to be clear that right now there are not going to be any restrictions on SNAP purchases beyond the ones that already exist that are planned in Illinois, but there are states that are moving forward with some of those restrictions. So thankfully we're not one of them, and we want to stay vigilant in case the federal government tries to force some of those restrictions on us, but Illinois is currently not doing that.
We also had an excellent question from anonymous attendee. How can funders help during this time? It's a really important question. I think some funders themselves engage in lobbying work, some do not. But to the extent to which your foundation is able to engage in advocacy related to protecting this, vital safety net benefit in the state of Illinois, that is one opportunity, lifting your voice with the power and the networks that you have. And I'll also just note, as we have said, local hunger is going to skyrocket in our local communities. There are so many organizations that are working alongside us, but also in their own everyday networks to meet the needs of community, whether that be through mutual aid, whether that be through donation drives at local schools, whether that be through actually standing up a new or existing food pantry within the basement of a church. Like our emergency food system is not prepared to respond to the scale of need we are about to see in community. And to be clear, charity and charitable contributions are just going to be a small drop in the bucket related to the need we're going to see. But there is going to be so much of a need to resource organizations that are doing this vital food security work in the months and the years ahead, alongside advocates that are also doing work to protect other critical safety net benefits on the Medicaid side and beyond.
Okay, I think last question. Anonymous asked, specifically they were asking how bills are impacting mixed immigration status. And I was curious, Nolan, if you wanted to share how these changes will impact mixed immigration status households.
Sure. So I think I'll focus on the immigrant eligibility restrictions, but there's also a nuance with work requirements as well. But with immigrant eligibility restrictions, I mentioned there were 16,000 people roughly that we think are going to start losing benefits starting April 1st. About 2,000 of those people are in mixed status households. And so what would happen at the next redetermination is the person who's not in a status that is eligible any longer would be removed from the SNAP household. And if there are remaining members that are still eligible, their benefit would be recalculated based on that smaller household size. So those households would experience a reduction. Shout out to our partners at the Department of Human Services who are going to have to calculate all of that manually. But that is one place where that shows up. So those households will not completely lose benefits, but would experience a reduction in benefits. The same is actually true on the work requirement side. So you could have some members of a household, some of which are subject to work requirements and others of which are not. And so if somebody loses their benefits because of work requirements, they would be removed from the household, and the remaining household members who are still eligible would have their benefits recalculated based on that household size. And we think on the work requirement side, we're likely to see that scenario probably a lot more frequently, where people get a reduced SNAP amount rather than losing their benefits entirely.
And Nolan, just to add, since they mentioned pandemic EBT, just flagging for this population, child nutrition programs still don't have a citizenship requirement. So school meals, summer EBT, access to WIC, other programs are still vitally important as we see folks restrict access to SNAP. And so how do we make sure that those programs are still being utilized to the best of their ability and are still there for this population?
And we had maybe one last question is how does the state plan to fund the $800 million that will go into effect for the SNAP program? We don't know right now. We don't think there's a magic plan behind closed doors related to answering this, but we know that it is our job as advocates to be calling to question like the fact that this needs to be paid and SNAP benefits are critically necessary for our communities. And with your support, with your advocacy, we can make that case statewide in the year ahead. So really grateful for the partnership, for all the ways we will continue to take action after this call. And Molly, I'll kick it to you to close us out.
Thank you all so much. This is a level of engagement we do not commonly see on our webinars. And so I can tell how fired up you all are. I can tell how passionate you all are, which just makes us feel so much more passionate and fired up and makes our job so much better and easier. Thank you all again for spending the last hour with us. There are questions we didn't get to, so feel free to follow up. You can email back when you receive my follow-up email. You hopefully know where to find us otherwise, but always happy to help answer questions, help direct folks to other people who can answer questions. And thank you all again. Truly, it is through your voice, through every action that you're going to take with us, that we're going to take together throughout the year, that we're going to be able to make and see real change. So excited to get to work and to be in partnership with all of you throughout the year. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.